The story opens with an eerie introduction to Blackwood High, a school that's been standing for over a century, nestled in a quiet, isolated town. The building's Gothic architecture and overgrown ivy give it an intimidating appearance. Despite being closed for years, strange reports about the school's hauntings still circulate. Former students and teachers claim to hear unsettling noises and see strange apparitions, but no one has dared investigate in decades, until now. Enter a new generation of students, eager to uncover the truth about Blackwood's troubled past. They're drawn in by the school's reputation for supernatural activity, and they soon find themselves caught in a web of terror that spans decades. The backstory. In the early 1900s, Blackwood High was a place of high academic standing and success. But behind the prestigious reputation, the school's history is marred by tragedy. It's said that every year, around Halloween, one student would go missing, only to be found days later, disoriented and barely able to speak. They would often mutter about hearing voices in the walls, seeing figures in the shadows, or being called to the school's hidden basement. Then, in the 1930s, something much darker happened. A beloved teacher, Mr. Nathaniel Crawford, mysteriously vanished from his office one night, never to be seen again. His disappearance was just the beginning of a series of bizarre events, unexplained deaths, disappearances, and whispers of a curse that seemed to haunt anyone who set foot in Blackwood High after dark. But before Crawford vanished, he was known to be obsessed with the school's history, particularly an old, abandoned part of the school hidden beneath the main building, rumored to have been used as a secretive, underground meeting place for occult rituals in the early days of the school. Fast forward to the present day, and the school has been abandoned for years. A group of students, led by an inquisitive and fearless teenager named Riley, decides to explore the school, determined to document any paranormal activity and learn the truth behind its dark history. As they enter the school, they find it eerily intact despite its abandonment. The lights flicker on and off, the air smells musty like old books and mildew, and the silence is almost deafening. But as they start to explore the dark hallways, strange things begin to happen. Room 112. The first eerie experience occurs in room 112, where they hear faint whispers from behind the walls. As they search, they find an old journal hidden beneath a floorboard. The journal is filled with disturbing notes written by Mr. Crawford, including references to a hidden truth beneath the school and the mention of something called the Veil, a supernatural barrier that traps the souls of the lost. The hallway mirror. Later, one of the students, Zoe, spots a large cracked mirror in the hallway. As she gazes into it, her reflection begins to move independently, smiling back at her in a sinister way. When she turns around, no one is there, but the reflection in the mirror continues to grin, distorted and malevolent. The bell tower. The group ventures to the school's bell tower, which has been abandoned and rotting for years. As they ascend the stairs, they hear the faint sound of a school bell ringing, even though the bell hasn't worked in decades. When they reach the top, they find the bell mysteriously swinging on its own, as if someone is pulling the rope from the inside. The discovery. The group eventually stumbles upon the long-forgotten basement under the school. The door is locked, but they manage to break it open. Inside, the air is thick with dust, and old, rotting furniture is piled in corners. At the far end of the basement, they find a strange, locked door, covered in symbols that resemble those in Mr. Crawford's journal. As they attempt to break open the door, strange things start happening. One by one, the students begin to experience terrifying hallucinations. Visions of Mr. Crawford. Riley starts to see the figure of Mr. Crawford walking through the hallways, his face gaunt and hollow-eyed. He reaches out to her, whispering, "You should never have come." Whispers from the walls. Another student, Alex, hears voices coming from the walls, speaking to him directly. "Help us. We've been here for so long. The veil is slipping." The disappearing student. One student, Emma, suddenly vanishes. Her scream echoes through the halls, but when the group rushes to find her, she's gone. Only her flashlight remains on the floor. As the group fights to escape the basement, they discover an ancient ritual circle etched into the floor. The veil, they learn, is a barrier that was once used to bind restless spirits to the school, keeping them trapped in an endless loop. Mr. Crawford's obsession with this ritual had led him to attempt to break the veil, inadvertently allowing dark forces to invade the school. In a desperate attempt to escape, Riley realizes that the key to freeing the trapped souls and surviving lies in completing the ritual Mr. Crawford had started. They must open the veil and set the spirits free. However, doing so comes at a terrible cost. As the ritual concludes, the spirits of the lost students, those who vanished over the years, are freed, but the school begins to collapse around them. The group barely escapes as the school crumbles to the ground, the sounds of collapsing walls and the distant, mournful cries of the trapped souls filling the air. As they stand outside, watching the school burn, Riley looks back one last time and sees Mr. Crawford's figure standing at the window, finally at peace. The students were lucky to escape, but the curse of Blackwood High might not be over. Some doors, once opened, are never meant to be closed. It was the start of a new school year, and freshman Emily was excited to begin her high school journey. But there was something off about room 213, the room where she had her history class. The first time she entered, she couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something wasn't right. The air felt heavy, the lights flickered at odd intervals, and the walls were adorned with old, faded portraits of past students who looked as if they were watching her. But it wasn't just the room's strange atmosphere that unsettled Emily. It was the stories she'd heard. Rumor had it that room 213 had a dark past. Decades ago, a student named Sarah had disappeared from the school. No one knew exactly what happened to her. Some said she was involved in a tragedy in the room. Others claimed she'd simply vanished one day. However, after Sarah's disappearance, the room was never the same. Strange occurrences began happening. Students reported hearing footsteps when no one was around, whispers from the shadows, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Emily brushed off the stories as just another high school myth, a blend of urban legends passed down through generations. But that changed one afternoon during a history class. The teacher, Mr. Harris, was known for being a bit eccentric, but on that day, he seemed particularly distant. He was giving a lecture about the school's history when he abruptly stopped mid-sentence, his eyes glazed over. He turned toward the class, but his voice was no longer his own. "She never left," he said, his voice low and hollow. "She's still here, waiting." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. A few students nervously laughed, thinking it was just a joke, but Emily noticed something horrifying. Mr. Harris's eyes seemed to glow faintly. His pupils dilated unnaturally. He stared at her for a moment longer than necessary. She could feel her heart racing as the room grew unbearably cold. After that day, Emily couldn't ignore the strange happenings in room 213. Desks would shift positions when no one was looking, and at night, students who stayed late claimed to see shadows moving on their own. But the worst part came when Emily was assigned to stay after class to catch up on some work. The room was silent, and as the clock struck 5 p.m., she heard a faint whisper behind her. Turning around, she saw nothing. But the whisper came again, closer this time, a cold breath on her neck. "Help me," the voice whispered, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Emily's hands trembled as she turned back to her desk. She could feel the presence of something, someone, right behind her. But when she looked, no one was there. It was then that Emily saw it. Written on the blackboard in messy, uneven handwriting was a single sentence: "Sarah never left." Terrified, she ran out of the classroom, vowing never to step foot in room 213 again. But as she hurried out into the hallway, she glanced back to see the door slowly creaking shut on its own. She swore she saw a shadowy figure standing in the window, watching her. To this day, Emily won't speak of what happened in room 213. But those who've stayed after school late say the room is still haunted by the spirit of Sarah. And if you're ever in the building long enough after hours, you might hear the soft whisper of someone calling for help. Just remember, once you hear it, it may already be too late.